The Enfield Poltergeist. In the sweltering summer of 1977, the Hodgson family's modest council house at 284 Green Street in Enfield, North London, became the stage for one of the most chilling and controversial hauntings ever recorded. What started as an ordinary day for the Hodgsons would soon spiral into a terrifying descent into the unknown, a story that would grip the world and haunt those who dared to look deeper. Peggy Hodgson, a single mother of 4, was used to the everyday challenges of raising her children, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy, on her own. Life was far from easy, but it was predictable, manageable. That all changed one late August night when the quiet routine of their lives was shattered by a series of inexplicable events. It began innocuously enough. Peggy was settling down after a long day when she heard a loud thud coming from the upstairs bedroom shared by her daughters, Margaret and Janet. Rushing to the room, she found her daughters wide-eyed and shaken. A heavy chest of drawers had moved on its own, blocking the door. The girls swore they hadn't touched it. Peggy, trying to keep calm, pushed the chest back against the wall, but as soon as she let go, it moved again, this time with a force that sent her stumbling back. Terrified, Peggy gathered her children and fled to a neighbor's house. Vic and Peggy Nottingham, their neighbors, were a no-nonsense couple, not given to flights of fancy. But when Vic entered the Hodgson house to investigate, he, too, heard the strange knocking sounds that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. He checked the pipes, the floors, the attic, nothing. Whatever was causing the noise wasn't of this world. As the days passed, the phenomena escalated. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, reverberating through the walls day and night. Objects began to move on their own, as if propelled by invisible hands. Chairs slid across the floor, toys were flung across the room, and even the family dog seemed unnerved, barking in empty corners. But it was Janet, the 11-year-old daughter, who seemed to be at the center of the storm. She began to experience terrifying episodes where she felt as though something was inside her, something cold and malevolent. It started with night terrors. Janet would wake up screaming, her bed shaking violently as if it were trying to throw her off. Soon, these episodes escalated to full-blown fits, during which Janet would speak in a deep, guttural voice that was not her own. One night, the voice, gravelly and menacing, introduced itself as Bill Wilkins. "This is my house," it growled through Janet's lips. "I'll never leave." The family was horrified. They had never heard of a Bill Wilkins, but the voice continued, describing in chilling detail how he had died in the very house years earlier. He spoke of sitting in his favorite chair, suffering a sudden hemorrhage, and being unable to move as his life slipped away. Desperate and fearing for her children, Peggy called the police. When officers arrived, they were skeptical until they witnessed a chair slide across the floor right before their eyes. But the police, despite their authority, were powerless against whatever was haunting the Hodgsons. All they could do was offer sympathy and suggest the family seek spiritual help. Word of the haunting quickly spread, and soon the Hodgson home became the epicenter of a media storm. Reporters from the Daily Mirror were the first to arrive, hoping to capture proof of the supernatural. They were not disappointed. During their visit, they witnessed and documented objects flying across rooms, beds shaking violently, and most chilling of all, Janet being lifted and thrown by an unseen force. The photographs they published, the most famous of which showed Janet seemingly levitating in midair, her face contorted in terror, captured the public's imagination. But they also drew the attention of paranormal investigators, including Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair from the Society for Psychical Research. Grosse and Playfair moved into the Hodgson home, determined to document every aspect of the haunting. They set up recording equipment, monitored the family day and night, and interviewed witnesses. Over the course of several months, they amassed hundreds of hours of audio recordings, capturing everything from unexplained noises to the eerie voice of Bill Wilkins speaking through Janet. But as the investigation deepened, the haunting grew darker, more malevolent. The enemy seemed to relish the attention, growing stronger with each passing day. Janet's fits became more violent, her voice more guttural, as the spirit of Bill Wilkins, or whatever was pretending to be him, tightened its grip on her. Objects flew with greater force, Doors slammed with terrifying intensity, and the house itself seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it were breathing alongside the entity that dwelled within. The investigators were baffled, yet captivated. Gross, who had lost his daughter in a tragic accident years earlier, was particularly affected by the case. He saw in Janet a connection to the afterlife, something that might offer answers to the questions that had haunted him for years. But as much as he wanted to help, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were dealing with something far beyond their understanding. The climax came one night in November, when the activity in the house reached a fever pitch. Janet, in a trance-like state, began speaking in multiple voices, men, women, children, each one more disturbing than the last. The voices mocked the investigators, taunted them, daring them to drive the entity out. Objects flew across the room with deadly speed, narrowly missing the investigators. The house groaned under the strain of the spiritual battle taking place within its walls. Desperate, Gross and Playfair called in the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine, the famous American paranormal investigators. The Warrens had dealt with countless hauntings, but they quickly realized that the Enfield case was different. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, immediately sensed a powerful presence in the house, a presence that was neither human nor demonic, but something in between, something ancient and restless. The Warrens performed a series of rituals, attempting to banish the entity, but it fought back with ferocity. Lorraine's visions grew darker, more terrifying, as she saw the house as a gateway, a portal to something unspeakably evil. It was a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead had become dangerously thin. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the haunting started to subside. The knocks grew quieter, the voices less frequent. The oppressive atmosphere began to lift, and Janet's fits became less severe. By the end of 1978, the house had fallen into an uneasy silence. The Hodgsons, though deeply traumatized, were finally able to reclaim their lives. But the events at 284 Green Street left a lasting mark on all who were involved. Gross and Playfair published their findings, convinced that the haunting was real and that the Hodgson family had been subjected to a malevolent force beyond human comprehension. The Warrens, too, left Enfield with a profound sense of unease, knowing that they had only scratched the surface of something far darker. Skeptics, of course, were quick to dismiss the case as a hoax, concocted by a family seeking attention or escape from their grim reality. But the sheer volume of evidence, eyewitness accounts, recordings, photographs, continues to fuel debate to this day. The Enfield Poltergeist remains one of the most well-documented and hotly contested cases of supernatural activity in history. As the years have passed, the story of the Enfield Poltergeist has become legend, inspiring books, documentaries, and films that continue to captivate and terrify audiences around the world. For some, it is a cautionary tale about the dangers of meddling with forces beyond our understanding. For others, it is proof that the supernatural is real, lurking just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. The Hodgson family eventually moved away, leaving behind the house that had brought them so much fear and pain. But the question remains, what really happened in that house? Was it the work of a restless spirit, or something far more sinister? And could it happen again? The answers may never be fully known, but the Enfield Poltergeist stands as a chilling reminder that the unknown is out there, waiting for those who dare to confront it. In the quiet suburb of Enfield, on an unremarkable street, a door was opened to something otherworldly, and the world will never be the same.